Will people come, will the MAGA voters turn up to save white America from becoming a minority in this? Or will women show up to defend the reproductive rights of women? That's where the battle is in November. Oh, first of all, thank you very much for having me on your show. The article that you're referring to that I wrote for the News Journal, and it was also based on a dialogue between Senator Brian Townsend as well as the chairperson of the Republican Party, Judge Jane Brady. She was the other person who spoke on that show of mine. So what has happened is that until a few weeks ago, we thought that what would happen in the midterms is what normally happens in the US, which is the president's party loses ground. There have been only, I think, one occasion in the last 20-30 years where the president's party did not lose ground in the midterm election. So it was expected that the Democrats would definitely lose the House, but that they would be neck and neck in the Senate. And so the critical aspect was, the critical question was, will the Republicans take both the House and the Senate? However, several things have happened since, and one of them was obviously the passage of the Inflation Reduction Act, which pumps over $450 billion into climate change. This is historically the biggest amount of money that the US government has allocated to combating global warming and climate change. And the hope is that this is going to mobilize young voters, young Democrats, college students who were otherwise not very excited about President Biden's presidency. And so we might be able to bring young voters back to vote. Those who voted for him in 2020 probably would come back, the younger ones, to vote again in 2022. That's one assumption. The second thing was that, how should I put it? You know, if Democrats hold the Congress in in November, I think the MVP would be the Supreme Court or Senator Lindsey Graham. Between the two of them, I wonder who is going to be responsible for ensuring that the Democrats retain. So the Dobbs case from the Supreme Court, which essentially has reversed women's reproductive rights, essentially made Roe versus Wade redundant in red states. It is still, I mean, blue states are passing laws which allow and permit abortion, but red states are passing laws which are unbelievably strict and with no exceptions in some states. So it has really angered the voters, and this is not just a Democratic perception. There's an interesting article on Vox, VOX. It's a website, news website. I would recommend people to say, and it interviews a pollster who's looking at voter registration for the midterms, and he looked in particular at the voter registration in the Kansas state, where it's a red state, but voters have overwhelmingly overturned an attempt by the state to pass a constitutional amendment which would have essentially banned abortion. And that came as a shocker, right? But he says that when he looked at voter registration, historically voter registration would be 50-50, 50 male, 50 female. But there are two things that are happening now. You see more and more people registering to vote in the midterm. So it is possible that we are going to have a historically high voter turnout in November. But the second thing is that, at least in the Kansas case, the new voters who were registering to vote were 70% women. So basically what is happening is that GOP is going to meet their Joan of Arc in November. Women voters are going to come, and probably the Democrats are hoping that young women voters, undecided women voters, independent women voters, and even Republican women voters will come out and vote aggressively and angrily against the GOP and prevent this possibility of the Democrats losing either of the two houses. There is also an interesting thing that the debate that is going on about abortion rights. So Republicans said, look, Roe versus Wade does not, reversal of Roe versus Wade is not actually a banning of abortion. What we are just doing is we are giving it back to the states, and the states can decide what to do. And we are not going to do anything nationally. But here comes Senator Lindsey Graham and says he proposes a bill which places a ban after 15 weeks. He's also sent a signal to American voters is that if the GOP takes control of the House and the Senate, they are going to come up with a bill nationally that could, basically ban abortion in blue states too. So that is a fear. So it is quite possible that this culture war element alone might save the Democrats in November. A couple of things to understand. We are in a very peculiar economic situation. Technically, we are in a recession already because the first 2 quarters of this year, the American economy has shrunk. It shrunk by 1.6% in the first quarter, and I think by 0.6% in the second quarter. So a recession is often defined as 2 consecutive shrinking of economy, that your GDP declines for 2 quarters in a row. That means you are in a recession. But in the first quarter, we had unusually high degree of unemployment. So there were lots of jobs. There are still about 10 million jobs out there which haven't been filled. So we have a strange economy where, at least in the first quarter, there were jobs that were available. There were salaries and wages were rising, which also contributed a little bit to the inflation. So it was difficult to actually make the call that we are it's difficult for experts and economists to say that we are in a recession. But the recent numbers of the consumer price index shows that we have gone up to 8.3%. So actually it has increased. Even though gas prices have come down, the consumer price index has gone up from 8.2, I think, to 8.3%. So what that tells us is that this inflation is very stubborn. And then we saw the stock market take a bit of a dive. And when the stock market begins to lose, I think corporations become less willing to invest. So it is quite possible that it will impact the labor market in the third quarter. And so if inflation persists in the third quarter and unemployment begins to rise, so with food prices high, etc., even though the fuel prices are under control, and then if we keep hearing news items where the president is spending billions and billions and billions of dollars in the war in Ukraine, we gave $40 billion and another $13 billion and another $600 million. So it seems to be that we have come out of one endless war and we have gone into another never-ending war, which is a big hole in our budget. So that is a challenge, and lots of commentators also feel that while people might be angry about the abortion issue, in blue states where it is not a threat, right, it is quite possible that the pocketbook issues might actually dictate and determine the voting pattern. And so that is thing. And plus, it is quite possible that if this, we have about 50 days for the midterm, and if life is a bit difficult economically for people, then they're going to say, what kind of a president is Joe Biden? I mean, his so-called inflation reduction bill has not fulfilled what it was supposed to do. Plus, there is also this constant Republican narrative saying that Biden is buying votes. So this the forgiveness of college debt and all of these perks that are being given are being seen as an attempt by the Democratic president to buy midterm votes. So the narrative is also going to count. This coming November election is very critical, actually, because there are regular issues that impact midterm elections. The economy, inflation, jobs, and the fact that the president himself is not very popular, in spite of everything that has happened, the passage of the Inflation Reduction Bill and the passage of forgiveness of college debt, his approval ratings are still in the -10 category. It's still at the 40s, 41, 42 here and there, and disapproval ratings are in the 50s. So yes, he went from the 37, 38 to 41, 42, so there is a slight bump, but the gap still remains significant. So an unpopular president also becomes a burden on the president's party. But there's also this other thing that's going on with Trump, the January 6 hearings, the anger among a segment of the American population, the fear that the Democrats are going to, this replacement theory argument that Democrats are bringing in people like me to replace the white people. I don't know why they don't like me. I'm so good looking and so smart, but anyway, they don't like me. So apparently people of color are being brought from third world countries to replace white people. So they are worried that they are going to lose their country. So this fear might drive the voter. The country seems to be pretty half and half. The 2020 election was very, very scary. I was amazed at the fact that Donald Trump still got 70 million votes. He came very close. I think he got historically the second highest votes that any presidential candidate ever got. So in spite of everything that he did in 4 years, there was a large segment of the population still willing to vote. And I suspect that if he had handled the COVID in a much more positive fashion, he might have won in 2020. So that's very scary to me, that there is a segment in America which is going to vote ideologically and culturally and maybe even racially. And let me tell you this, I think that the Republican voters are more religious. The pun is unintended, but more religious in their voting than Democrats are. So you can bet on Republicans showing up to vote on November 8th. So this cultural aspect of it is where we have an interesting aspect. So will people come, will the MAGA voters turn up to save white America from becoming a minority in this? Or will women show up to defend the reproductive rights of women? That's where the battle is in November. It presents a very, very dangerous puzzle, It is quite obvious if you look at the January 6th Commission and the way it was going around, that it was determined to nail Trump. The whole idea was to ensure that Trump is unable to run in November. And that is my fear, that if that does happen, let's say that Trump is banned from running for office in 2024, or he's arrested, and that is a scary thing to me, because it's going to upset a lot of people in this country. And we say jokingly that, professors, teachers, and media people, we have pens, but all the 400 million guns are on the side of Donald Trump, right? So his supporters have all the guns. So that's a very scary thing. And while I do understand the need to investigate what happened in January 6th, but I don't think that it has to be just legal. I think we should look at it from a cultural phenomenon. Why are people in America so upset, so angry, so insecure, and what can we do to ensure that those anxieties are addressed, rather than to further enhance that anxiety by, in a tricky way, getting rid of the only person who speaks for them. That's how they see it, that Donald Trump is the only one who stands for us. And if we find some, legalistic way of getting him out of the game, then I think it is going to, I don't want to use the word, but I'm going to use it now, a potential civil war-like situation, right? We don't want that. I don't want to see violence in the streets. I was listening to Robert Pape, a professor at the University of Chicago, who is studying this phenomenon, and according to his surveys, he says there are 13 million people in America, more than the population of Belgium, who are willing to use force and violence to make sure that Donald Trump becomes president of this country. We're looking at about 5% or more of the country, who are interested who are committed to the idea of using violence. So we have to beat Trump at the polls fair and square. We have to beat him with a better vision of America. We have to beat him with a better promise, a credible promise of a better future for all Americans than what Donald Trump's. I think we have to beat him from a vision perspective and not use these legalistic methods. I also think that, let's say that Democrats get lucky, something really pops up where a small segment of the Republicans are also willing to concede and say, oh, okay, Donald Trump did this illegal stuff, and so let's put him away. But once you open that door, I guarantee you that as soon as the Republicans win the Congress or the Senate, then you will see legal cases against Democratic presidents. So if you're going to have this tit for tat going forward, we already saw what happened with the Hillary's, email fiasco. The hearings went on and on and on. So instead of governing the country and finding what is best in the long-term interest of the United States, we are going to be essentially in a political scenario where the two political parties are going to basically settle political scores and go after each other's leadership. So this is going to be a very problematic thing. So, and I don't think the Democrats should open that door. And yes, there are some Democrats who are very angry and say, well, we let the Republicans get away with all kinds of nonsense with what happened on January 6th. I think that we have already let a lot of people who did nasty stuff on January 6th get away with it. I guarantee you, if the people who attacked the Capitol were Muslims or blacks, we would have used F-16s against them. Don't get me wrong, I think that Donald Trump is the biggest threat to American democracy that we have had in a long, long time, but we need to win this battle fair and square, and so above, shall we say, any hanky-panky stuff that even Republicans should reluctantly concede that, yes, he deserved what he got. So, all said and done, I think Biden is a dampener. A lot of young people in the Democratic Party, a lot of progressives don't like him. For a lot of people, Biden is not very inspirational at all. See, when a party brings in 80-year-old people to run for the party, what it's trying to say is that we have no future. We are just looking at the past. And that is not a happy signal to send. So I have a feeling that if it becomes very clear come October that Biden is not going to be running in 2024, I think it will help the Democrats in the primaries, because there are people on the progressive side. I know a lot of people who are not very happy, and they are stuck, the poor guys. They're not happy with Biden, but they just absolutely don't like Trump or MAGA Republicans. So what are they going to do? They probably will not vote, right? And so I have a feeling that one more way to increase Democratic voter turnout would be for Biden to clearly signal that come 2024 he is not going to be running for president, and also signal at the same time that we will have an open primary. We should not automatically crown Kamala Harris, because so far her performance has not been inspiring, to be honest. And the fact that that she's not playing a major role in many issues also says that even the President Biden doesn't think very highly of her. That's why he is not delegating important tasks to her. Let's say hypothetically Trump retires or has a heart attack. It doesn't mean that the MAGA Republicans are going to go away. There are people who will compete for that political spot in the political spectrum called Trump. So I won't be surprised that people like DeSantis or Josh Hawley or even Marco Rubio, Ted Cruz, for example. Oh my God, he's a nightmare. So Ted Cruz could say, okay, now I'm the new Trump, and I'm going to be a nastier Trump. And you know what? If Ted Cruz says I'm going to be a nastier Trump, that would be a very, very credible claim. So I don't think that putting Trump in prison or him passing away or anything is going to empty that spot. There is that political position which someone else can potentially fill. So it is very important that the next 8 to 10 years in the United States are handled. So some people could argue that we need a wise person, right? We need wisdom, and then say that would justify Biden running again, and saying people like Pete Buttigieg, who are very young, maybe smart but not wise. I don't know. I mean, Buttigieg can be running for office, or somebody younger running for office. And one of the problems in our political system is this longevity of politicians. And it's partly because of money, I think. Once you have connections to big money, which takes a while to establish, and then winning becomes easier and automatic because you have a lot of money at your side. So new challenges, even within the party, struggle because they're not able to raise the huge amounts of money that is required to win elections today. I sometimes jokingly describe our elections as auctions.